The decision of buying a house or renting an apartment can be a challenging one. For many, the best choice is obvious. But what you'll learn in this video could shock you and might even change your stubborn, close-minded way of thinking. Some of you may be determined to purchase your own home.
Home.
While others may be looking for a cozy little apartment to rent.
The level of cockroach infestation is remarkable. Cockroach families along the hallway are like families gathering. Living in this apartment is like living in a ghetto. I wish I could give -5 stars.
Speaking of stubborn and close-minded, boomers are the generation that own the most homes when compared to renting an apartment, coming in at a staggering 37% of the total homes owned in the United States. That's saying a lot for a generation that only makes up about 20% of the population. You might be wondering, why is this? Well, back in the good old days, when the world actually made sense, the economy for the baby boomers was ideally set up for the purchase of a home, thanks to the availability of many stable, high-paying jobs. Interest rates were also much lower, hovering around 4 to 5%, as opposed to the insanity of today's rates. This, government policies of the time, and many other factors incentivized home ownership over renting. However, many of you may be noticing a shift away from this in today's times. This is due to multiple reasons, one of which I mentioned before. Primarily because of inflation, interest rates are very high. This is causing many to try and wait out the storm in hopes of some return of financial normalcy. Another reason is that, unlike the boomer generation where workers typically stayed at their workplace for their entire career, people live more mobile these days, both in lifestyle and within the workforce, and a house is just too permanent of a commitment to allow for such a nomadic way of life. So, which category do you fall into? Are you one of those who believe homeownership is the smarter way to live and pity those who are flushing their money down the toilet, renting an overpriced studio apartment in some crime-ridden ghetto, while at the mercy of that wanker of a landlord they have who doesn't upkeep any maintenance and constantly raises rent with ultimately nothing to show for it? Or do you believe that renting an apartment is the better option, giving you the freedom to avoid those diabolical 7.5% interest rates, not having to bust your ass mowing the lawn during a blazing hot summer day, or freezing your balls off shoveling snow during the next polar vortex, all the while being prisoner to that crushing 30-year mortgage? Or maybe you don't know what to do, which is why you're watching this video. Well, you've come to the right channel, because here on World Inquiry, I do all the work and research and weigh the pros and cons for both sides to help you to determine which is the best decision for you. Will you choose the path of purchasing a house as both a long-term investment that will actually belong to you in the end, that you're also free to do with as you please? Or on the contrary, perhaps you'll find that renting an apartment is the better option, allowing you to avoid such a long-term commitment while also giving you the freedom to live a more fluid lifestyle. We'll go over each decision and explain the determining factors, allowing you to make an educated decision when the time comes. We'll kick off this debate by first discussing the reasoning in favor of buying a house.
Would you just look at this giant-ass log cabin? I mean, come on, what more could you want?
It's pretty great.
One of the primary reasons for buying a house over renting an apartment is likely the same reason that your parents beat into your skull ever since growing up and looking to move out from under their harsh dictatorship of living rent-free and having all your meals and laundry taken care of. And that reason is to build equity. I'm sure you've all heard that saying I mentioned earlier. Probably the same thing you heard your dad tell you countless times.
Don't throw your money away on rent, buy a house instead.
When you buy a house, other than the money you waste away to those greedy financial institutions with their crippling interest rates, the money you pay towards it is actually an investment, and in spite of all my negativity, is probably one of the best investments you'll ever make in your entire life. The housing market almost always appreciates over time, and with an average return rate of about 10%, it's no wonder Pops was always nagging you to
Buy a house instead of just getting an apartment and moving out before you're ready.
Another advantage of home buying over apartment renting is the freedom to do what you want with it to suit your needs. As Reddit user Blind Narcissus says,
For me, it's psychological. I like the idea of having my own little slice of the world I can do whatever I want with.
having the ability to modify the house, add on to it, buy and use whatever you'd like as you see fit. These are options you have with home ownership that you just typically can't do while renting an apartment. Many also see home ownership as much more stable than renting. Typically, upon purchasing a home, you'll be able to get a fixed-rate mortgage, so you don't have to worry about drastic changes in your monthly payment, as you might with renting, which is subject to change by a landlord whenever they see fit. Another huge plus that comes with owning a home is that the living spaces are typically larger. Unless you have tons of cash just laying around and can afford to rent a huge apartment, houses are usually bigger than apartments, especially when you factor in the entire lot with yard space. A yard also increases your flexibility, so you can have a shed or pole barn for extra storage. A larger yard may even allow adequate room for a separate in-law suite, which is great for accommodating guests, or even running a revenue-generating business out of such as an Airbnb or even an apartment, so you can have a tenant paying for part of your mortgage. Of course, owning a house isn't all sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of responsibility and even what some may call disadvantages that come with home ownership. Probably the most obvious disadvantage is the high upfront costs. Typically, the down payment for a house is 20%. And with the price of houses these days, that could mean a down payment of $100,000. Who has that kind of dough just laying around? Of course, this varies by state, but even in the Midwest, where the average price of a home is about $250,000, that still means a down payment of about $50,000. Even if you're able to weasel your way out of the down payment, there's still closing costs to be paid, which are generally 2 to 5% of the total house price, so still thousands of dollars. Since I know there will be some whiny little keyboard warrior out there leaving a comment along the lines of,
"The down payment is money spent towards the house, so it's an investment and not a disadvantage, you moron."
well, I'm using it as a disadvantage in the means of being a deterrent to buying a house over renting an apartment because it's so expensive initially.
Well, the stupid air conditioner pooped out, so we're gonna have to replace it.
That figures.
It's just one thing.
Another disadvantage is the maintenance costs you're responsible for when owning a house. And these days, the way some homes are shoddily slapped together, you may be buying a lemon of a home from the start. Then, there's risks outside of your control that can negatively affect your home's value. Things like market volatility or the local housing economy in your area. There also could be physical factors that negatively affect the value of your home, such as a highway being constructed along your property or a development, perhaps. Or you could just hold out like Edith Macefield of Seattle did in 2006. As you can see here, buying a house is a long-term commitment, which Edith clearly took pretty damn seriously. So this too can be a drawback of home ownership. You never know what can happen or where life will take you, so being tied down to a house and its mortgage can be a huge problem if something happens that requires relocating. But I suppose if you're rich enough to afford cigarettes these days, moving shouldn't be a problem. Now, moving on to the reasoning in favor of renting an apartment. One of the main advantages of renting is dodging those insane upfront costs that come with buying a house. Other than the typical security deposit and first month's rent requirement, an apartment is a much more affordable option for us common folk, the non-millionaire peasants. Listen to what Reddit user Bav from Boston has to say, as he, rather insecurely, touches on the upfront costs of home ownership.
Transaction costs and time on market kill short-term home ownership. If you plan to move every 5 years or sooner, renting will win, probably. I am sure you can come up with scenarios that make both look good. Long-term homeownership usually wins if you plan to stay put. Usually.
Apartment renting is also way more flexible, and you're normally only committed to a lease of 1 year, but other shorter time periods do exist, with some even offering month-to-month plans. This allows for those unexpected life events that may require relocation, like being fired or dumped.
I don't want you to be here anymore. I hate that you're so stupid. You're a
Another huge advantage of renting is that when something breaks or needs repaired or replaced, it's not your problem. You just let the landlord know and he'll jump right on it. Okay, so that ain't gonna happen. But the benefit is that it's their responsibility, not yours. And whatever is needed for the apartment, it will eventually get taken care of at no extra cost to you. Something else that comes with a lot of apartments are included amenities, such as a gym, a large community playground, on-site storage facilities, a pool, things of that nature. Unless you have money coming out of your ears, all of these are pretty hefty expenses for a house, and you have to have the physical room for them too. But just like with a house, renting an apartment has its fair share of suckiness as well. For starters, and I'm sure all the boomers would readily agree with me, you're not building any equity with an apartment. All of the money you pay goes into providing your own living area and the services and any extras that may come with it. In the end, you won't have anything to sell as you would with a house. Fortunately, this negative effect can be countered with some wise financial investing. There's also the constant looming risk of rent increases, sometimes without warning. Or even worse, the possibility of the landlord not renewing your lease, forcing you out to the streets like a wandering hobo. Another common problem, especially with the cheaply built apartments that are popping up all over the place, is the lack of privacy from potentially noisy neighbors.
Babe, I can't find my tampons. Oh my gosh, will you just shut up? I'm gonna lock you in the closet.
Then, of course, with an apartment, you really can't do any modifications to it, so you're stuck with how it is, or potentially worse yet, however the landlord wants it. So as you can see, whether you choose to purchase a house or rent an apartment, they both have their ups and downs. We'll now briefly go over all the pros and cons of both to help you make the best informed decision. Beginning with the advantages of home ownership, this is the option where you can build equity, appeasing the wishes of your worrisome parents. It also grants you the most control over everything to do with your house since you own it. Owning a house is also the most economically stable option, with the housing market generally appreciating over time. And owning a home also gives you the most space, relatively speaking, when compared to an apartment, especially when this is enhanced with a large yard. Now moving on to the disadvantages of home ownership. This option has the highest upfront costs, especially if you have to make that 20% down payment. All of the maintenance and upkeep is your responsibility to fork the money over to pay for, and that shit ain't cheap. Then there's outside risk factors out of your control that can potentially hurt the value of your home. And lastly, buying a house is a long-term commitment, so be as certain as possible of your own life situation before jumping into buying a house. Now, for the argument for renting an apartment, and beginning back on the pros, this option has the lowest upfront costs, generally with just a security deposit and the first month's rent. Apartment life is also the most flexible option, allowing for easier relocation. Maintenance and upkeep is the responsibility of the landlord, so you don't have to sell one of your kidneys just because you need a new roof. And you also have access to amenities that come included with your rent. Last but not least, the cons for renting an apartment include the inability to build any equity, the constant threat of that greedy landlord randomly increasing your rent. Next, you could be stuck living next to, under, or above some super annoyingly loud and obnoxious neighbors who are always getting the cops called on them for their constant shenanigans of arbitrary firearm discharges and hearing the screams of their victims. And of course, apartment life doesn't allow you to modify the building to suit your needs, giving you no control over what's basically yours. Hopefully after this video, you're able to make an informed decision on whether buying a house or renting an apartment is best for you. Maybe this is your first time getting out on your own, or to the contrary. Perhaps this ain't your first rodeo and you've played this little game before. Whichever the case may be, I wish you luck on your journey and be sure and tune in next time for more life advice. Just as the name World Inquiry implies, we want everyone's opinion on this so we can have a healthy, logic-based debate. I strongly encourage you to go to the comments section and put down your own thoughts over what we just discussed. So, which did you decide on? Where are you at in life? Are you a hardcore homebuyer who doesn't believe in the dismal lifestyle of renting an apartment? Are you a fellow of solitude who doesn't like nosy neighbors who can hear everything you're doing through those paper-thin walls? Or on the other hand, do you enjoy the social lifestyle of living in an apartment and pity those losers who live in an overly expensive house all by themselves? Do you look down on them from your penthouse balcony as they toil in the blistering heat of a hot summer day, pulling weeds and picking up sticks from their yard before mowing the lawn for 3 hours straight? Please share your own crazy stories of home ownership or apartment life in the comments section below. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. There will be more social debate style videos like this to come, so please subscribe to the channel as well. I want to sincerely thank you for watching.